Good evening, everybody. I call the April 8th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Thank you. Can we take a roll call, please?
Chair Yana Semenova.
Here.
Vice Chair Matt Constantine.
Here.
Rob Candrian.
Here.
Tabi Traber.
Here.
Nicole Hendricks.
Here.
Jeff Zendel.
Here.
Andrew Carr.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next on our agenda is to take consideration of our last meeting's minutes. This is the, was the March 30th?
Those
meeting?
aren't on the agenda for today
Oh.
because they just happened.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
Moving on to the next item, which will be our work session.
I think we need to do a citizen input talk real quick, but I don't have any attendees online. So
Okay.
there's no one
and-
in the audience.
Sounds good. I was going to have the citizen input during the work session. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. So next on our agenda for the work session is the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness for West Railroad Basalt Creek Master Plan. This work session is a chance for the Planning Commission to gain additional understanding of and provide guidance on ongoing legislative projects prior to a public hearing. As a courtesy, the Planning Commission will, as time permits, allow for a limited public comment on the topic after staff have presented their report for the Commission's purpose of continuing to understand the project. However, it should be noted that this is not a public hearing and any participants are encouraged to participate in a future public hearing for legal standing purposes. So this time I call for the city staff to present information they've prepared for the work session. Will please city staff present.
All right, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Appreciate your time. For the record, my name is Chris Myers. I'm a senior planner here at the City of Wilsonville and the project manager for the Basalt Creek Master Plan project. With me tonight, I have Lauren Scott from MIG Consulting. She'll be doing most of the presentation. Also joining us from MIG is Alex Dupe. He is online due to some illness that he is appropriately not spreading to the rest of us. Thank you, Alex. And of course, next to me is Matt Lorenzen, the City of Wilsonville's Economic Development Manager. So hopefully we'll be able to inform and answer any of the questions that might come up. So before we get started, tonight's work session really does focus on the West Railroad area that's within the Basalt Creek planning area itself. This has long been identified as a strategic employment area. It's intended to support long-term job growth in Wilsonville and the greater metropolitan region. In October of 2025, the Planning Commission and City Council held a joint work session where we reviewed existing conditions of the West Railroad area, and discussed 3 potential development concepts for the West Railroad area. Now, those concepts explored different approaches to development intensity, the transportation access, and environmental integration. Lauren's going to go into some detail during the presentation, so I'm not going to dive into that too much. But based on that feedback that we received during that work session, along with additional technical analysis, staff and the consultant team, we've developed a preliminary preferred concept for the West Railroad area, and you're going to see some of that tonight. That concept aims to balance economic development potential with environmental stewardship, by maximizing developable employment land while preserving key natural resources, and integrating recreational amenities like the Ice Age Tonkin Trail. It also identifies transportation improvements necessary to support long-term employment development, and freight access. Let's see, so tonight, as a reminder, we are seeking feedback. Please pause or have us pause, ask your questions. We want to have robust discussion and gather as much feedback that the commission has for us. And then lastly, just a reminder, we're going to be taking this same concept to council in about 12 days' time on April 20th. So they'll get basically the same thing. We will also integrate any feedback the commission has into that presentation to council and inform them of what you're thinking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, and she's going to walk you through the presentation.
Do I need to share my screen?
Oh, yeah, let's
Okay.
see if I can remember how to do this. You might know it better than I do. Yeah, you should just be able to share screen from there, I believe.
Or do I need to do it via Zoom?
I think,
Okay, thank you.
there we go.
Okay, thank you for bearing with me for that short moment. Like Chris said, I'm Lauren Scott. With me is my colleague Alex Dupe. We work with our Form MIG, a planning and design firm. We're really appreciative of your time tonight. We're hoping to share a little bit about where the project stands, review some of the feedback that you all and council shared in October 2025, since it's been a few months since that date. So we just want to refresh everybody for that before diving into going over the preliminary preferred concept and getting your feedback on that. As part of that, we also plan to share some of the technical analysis that's been happening. The city has contracted with DKS, who's done some analysis about further vetting the preferred concept, so we do have some of that information to share and help inform your feedback there. And then at the end, we'll just end with some next steps and a brief schedule overview. So where we are in the process, like Chris said, this is one of 2 work sessions focused on the West Railroad area. The second one will be with council a little bit later this month. We were working on a more compressed timeline in October 2025. Since then, there have been some staff retirements. The city decided to go out for that additional technical work. So we're regrouping now and moving forward with integrating the West Railroad concept planning back into the Basalt Creek master plan. Those work sessions, including some focus specifically on the land use code and zoning approach, will happen in the summer, and then tentatively adoption hearings into the fall. And since it's been a while since then, hopefully bear with me while we recap. I know we have some new members, and so we're just going to spend a little bit of time going over what was presented, the feedback we heard. At that meeting, like Chris said, we reviewed the existing conditions and touched on some of the earlier planning work that's been done for the area, including the habitat assessment work out there, the Echo Northwest industrial land readiness work, as well as the freight evaluation for that railroad undercrossing on Graham's Ferry Road, which is kind of a key challenge in this area. And we also revisited the Basalt Creek guiding principles and talked about how they could be specifically applied to that area, and then walked you through the 3 draft urban design concepts and begin identifying those preferred elements. And just before we get into those draft concepts, I'll briefly highlight a few key points about the site. Compared to the 1990s, there's a lot less sensitive habitat and natural resources today due to the development that's occurred out there. Most environmental constraints and those remaining natural resources do remain along the western edge of the site, along Coffee Lake Creek. The area typically has large parcels and good access to I-5, and today it's mostly contractor yards with a mining operation at the north end. So redevelopment in this area is a very long-term transition, long-term vision. It won't happen, within the next year, but we're looking ahead to what could occur out there. There are also some constraints to keep in mind. There's currently no sewer, no water, no stormwater infrastructure, road access is limited. The site is separated from the rest of the Basalt Creek planning area by the railroad, along with a BPA easement that runs along that rail line. And while there are a few existing connections to the site, there's a road into the mining operation from the north. It doesn't connect fully through the site. Same with a unpaved road to the south. And then again, that railroad undercrossing on Graham's Ferry Road is a limiting factor. In terms of trail alignments, the Ice Age Tonkin Trail conceptual alignment runs through a portion of the area, coming in from the west of the site and exiting at the southern tip of our planning area. And just briefly covering the guiding principles. These guiding principles were originally developed for the Basalt Creek concept plan. They've been revisited by staff in recent years, make sure they're up to date, they're still consistent with Wilsonville's vision and hopes for the area, and they helped shape the draft concepts we discussed in October and are carried forward through this preferred concept. The first set being market-driven, making sure that any plan supports both jobs and housing while also making the most of the site's economic potential. The second being balanced, taking advantage of the area's location and natural features while also exploring ways to mix housing and jobs and utilize that craft industrial land use type. And the key part of this is making sure different uses transition well between each other, as well as developing the right utility and transportation systems. And that third set of principles, which we spent a bit of time talking about and helped really inform the preferred concept, are aspirational and focus on the overall character of the area, maintaining and complementing Wilsonville's unique identity and creating a place that feels distinct within the region. And there's also an emphasis on creating that high quality business environment, something that stands out and is attractive to employers and workers. And then finally, making sure natural resource areas are treated as assets and integrated in a way that also provides recreational opportunities for the community. And so going over the draft concept, these came out of a collaborative work session with staff. As part of that process, we did explore a few what-if questions. What if this area was really focused on natural resources and we built the concept around it, versus what if this area had access to the full regional transportation network and really maximized employment. And so that helped frame the different ways of looking at the site. These were our old concepts that we shared with you all. The first concept, the Tonkin environment, it focused on integrating development with the site's natural features. It included enhancing that creek edge, extending the Ice Age Tonkin Trail, and creating a network of connected open space and trails. Development in this concept was envisioned to be a little more campus style with a mix of craft industrial and smaller scale office or manufacturing. And overall, the idea was to create a unique employment area that's closely tied to the natural setting where access to open space and recreation was the defining feature. For our second concept, manufacturing and industry, that focused on regional connectivity and supporting employment growth. It included upgrades to key transportation infrastructure, like the Graham's Ferry undercrossing and a potential public rail crossing at Cahalan Road. And that land use mix emphasized large-scale industrial and office park development to attract those higher density employment opportunities, and was intended to position the area as a potential industrial hub and supported by that improved access and circulation. Oh, I forgot I had animated this slide. Sorry about that, everyone. That third concept was the limited connectivity with flexible land use. This was a more incremental approach. It would allow for a broad mix of land uses, maybe not typically found elsewhere in Wilsonville, like commercial recreation, outdoor retail, storage, low-intensity small businesses. Instead of that aspirational vision, this concept was a little bit more about organic growth and letting the area, be what it may. And so getting into what we heard from you all, the guiding principles takeaways that we heard included leveraging those natural resources to both support community amenities and be used as a potential attractor for economic development. that the large parcel sizes could allow coordinated development, and it's a little bit easier or needing less city intervention than assembling 30 small parcels out in the area. And then supporting that employment that complements nearby Tualatin, contributing to that balanced mix of regional uses. Of course, now without its challenges, which were recognized by both commissioners and councilors, that limited infrastructure and connectivity. We talked about how there are flood risks near the wetlands. We know that Grahams Ferry Road floods at times. There's an important balance to strike between conservation with job creation. We know the habitat loss has occurred out there, but this is still a great industrial remaining area in Wilsonville, and how can we capitalize that? And then, of course, just the proximity to the railroad, while it's great for freight and could be, maximized, it limits certain land uses due to the vibrations or noise for high tech manufacturers that could be located out there, but couldn't due to this proximity. And then coordination with the railroad as well was recognized as a challenge to get a public crossing in that area. And then in terms of the preferred elements that we took away from this, the Tonkin Environment one, that concept one, it was great that it capitalizes on the trail and the Coffee Lake Creek Greenway, but on the flip side of that, the large areas that are dedicated to natural features could limit areas for jobs and economic activity. For that second one, manufacturing and industry, it was well liked that there's a strong potential for job creation and long-term revenue out here while still allowing for that integration of natural resources. However, just the acknowledgement that that does rely on infrastructure improvements, which rely on development occurring and helping, pay and construct those as well. And then that third draft concept, it was acknowledged that it does offer flexibility to adapt to market changes, but it lacks that clear and intentional vision. And it was really emphasized that, Wilsonville is that forward-thinking city, and this is an area and region that we should be aspirational in when looking at our concepts. And so that gave us a blend of concept 1 and 2 was the preferred direction. And I'll pause there because I just talked a lot and I talked quickly, but we want to make sure that we heard you right, and that if there's anything else, new commissioners that are, seeing this for the first time, if you have any feedback or thoughts on that.
I have a quick question. How does that deal with the railroad overcrossing on Grahams Ferry, which I know was an issue that was discussed, because that's like expensive to fix or change, and so how does this address that part?
Yeah, great question. And I have a few slides on that later on, but I will say that staff have been talking to the railroad operator, and the idea is not off the table yet. They're generally open to the idea. It would, obviously require additional coordination, additional funding to make that happen, but it's not off the table in the preliminary preferred concept that we're presenting tonight. And Matt, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but.
Just maybe a clarifying question back. Are we talking about the undercrossing or the overcrossing?
The undercrossing. So when you're coming up Grahams Ferry,
Right.
you go under the railroad. I just was like riding my bike there
Yeah,
today.
I sensed that you were talking about the undercrossing, but said overcrossing, and then she responded to overcrossing. So I think we're,
Make sure we're all talking about this.
Yeah.
Where the road crosses under and the railroad goes over the
There it
road.
is.
yeah. I think maybe if we just go ahead and have you cover what you're planning and then circle back to that if we're not hitting the mark. Okay.
Jeff, or you first?
You go first.
Who's first?
I was just going to say, having been part of some of those conversations, this does feel reflective of what we had talked about, and I appreciate the incorporation of because we were talking a lot about bike peds, so I think it makes sense for that regional trail connection, and then appreciate that it still looks like there's enough density there for, what we're trying to achieve with the employment offerings. So I appreciate the combo.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, this looks great to me too. One of the questions I had is thinking around the total available land that we'd be kind of envisioning being used for industry. One of these looks like it uses a lot less of the land for developable kind of space in exchange for more natural spaces, and I think that's kind of the intent. But how does that take us out of alignment with like the overall kind of economic opportunity analysis that we were talking about before, and the land use kind of readiness that we need to have for the overall city of Wilsonville?
Is that in reference to, sorry, the C1 Tonkin environment? That's
like
on
I
there?
love the natural spaces. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure we're like, does this compromise our ability to meet those land use readiness goals that we have, or would we be able to make that up elsewhere, or are there other ways that we're kind of thinking about that?
And that's a fair point that we took into the preferred concept, really focusing in on preserving wet upland tree habitat and, acknowledging that you're not going to be able to build right up against the wetlands right there, but kind of building out that purple area. And so the transportation analysis also uses these blobbies that are on the screen right now, understanding that for industrial development, you're going to have a lot of your site dedicated to internal circulation, off-street parking, landscaping, stormwater, things like that. So hopefully this strikes the right balance between protecting those existing natural resources that may still be there, recognizing that the Ice Age Tonkin Trail is a regional concept, and that should be incorporated in here while still maximizing developable areas.
Yeah, I think you're asking the right question, and it's the question we're actually posing to you tonight. Are we striking the right balance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wanted to give insight into what we talked about in October was right around this concept is, number one, great ideas behind it, but took too much space that was developable. And this is prime industrial developable land. And then two is a little bit too much over the top. That's why when we gave our opinion, we said, could we do 1 and 2 together? And it looks like this one is a nice cross between 1 and 2. So, yeah, you heard us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else before moving on into the preferred concept and kind of peeling back the layers of that?
I just had a clarification question. I noticed on one of the first slides, it mentioned something about housing, but I noticed in the diagrams there were no housing, so I just wanted to confirm there was no housing.
Correct.
Okay.
The Basalt Creek, I think that reference to the guiding principles. So that is for the entire Basalt Creek planning area.
Okay,
which encompasses more. So no housing out here.
I've read a lot of studies on pollution and living in those environments, so, okay, thank you.
Good clarification to make. Okay, so this is our preferred concept graphic. Like we just talked about, this aims to maximize that developable land where possible while still recognizing the environmental aspects at here, as well as the infrastructure constraints. You'll notice that the purple area and that internal local street are pulled off of the railway. That's to accommodate the BPA easement and acknowledge it in this concept plan. It seeks to still preserve that remaining habitat, again, enhancing the creek edge, helping maintain some natural character and recreational opportunities. It does consider some additional road connections to improve circulation and connectivity, and we're acknowledging that the exact layout will be refined as planning progresses and actual development occurs, but we are showing an internal north-south local street through the area. The connections would be to the north on Tonkin Road and to the south at Graham's Ferry. And then shown slightly differently on the concept, because we're acknowledging that it is aspirational, but we want to keep it in the mix, is that public rail crossing at Cahalan as well. And then in orange are the linkages to the Ice Age Tonkin Trail, as well as some internal pedestrian circulation. If that public rail crossing at Cahalan occurs, there could be an opportunity to connect through there as well. And so my next slides focus on land use, transportation, some of the elements, other elements more singularly.
Question. So it shows that there's a trail connection that goes over the water, would that have to be built? Is there an existing trail crossing that goes over the water? Or are we waiting?
I believe that's part of the conceptual trail alignment.
Which is
I just want to, sorry, Commissioner Carr, I want to clarify. You're looking at the orange dotted line that essentially is going
either over or under
east-west,
the water. Yes.
kind of almost lining up with Cahalan or Morgan.
Yes,
So I believe that that actually follows an existing access.
okay.
So you can't quite see it, but I think if you look close, there's a gray line under there.
Yes.
You can actually access kind of West Railroad from that backside. It kind of, there's a connection point essentially across a wetland. It doesn't look like a big lake, but it does look like a wetland, and depending upon the time of year, there's more or less water that's there.
Okay.
But this is conceptual at this point in time. So a lot of the Ice Age Tonkin Trail was delineated by Metro and the cities that will be connected by the trail. And there were definitely ideas for coming through this area, but there's always time for local refinement when we get to the point of actually design and construction of the trail.
So just focusing on land use for a minute, that's obviously the purple area on the graphic, representing where development would be concentrated. The preferred concept is envisioning a range of industrial park uses for flexibility from manufacturing to warehousing, but intending to overall position the area for that higher quality long-term employment and development. Again, important to note that this is aspirational. It's meant to guide the area's future, and the future discussions on zoning and the approach there will also play heavily into the land use vision and what can occur out there. And so getting into the transportation analysis, that's a key part of evaluating the preliminary preferred concept. DKS and Associates conducted an analysis to look at how the area could function with both the existing network and then any previously planned roadways, intersections, and other projects that may be identified in the city's transportation system plan. And that work basically just helped vet the preliminary concept. Are the arrows and dashes we're putting on this graphic actually able to happen, and do they have any unintended impacts? So just quickly on the methodology and approach, DKS used a 20-year traffic horizon, assuming any planned network improvements that were identified for that 20 years would occur. The analysis used the preferred land use scenario to reflect anticipated development intensity. Multimodal access was assessed, and that's including vehicles, freight, pedestrian, and bicycles, but all at a planning level scale. And then DKS and staff did coordinate with Washington County for the Tonkin Road connection, since that's in the county's jurisdiction, as well as the railroad operator about the Cahalan crossing. Some key assumptions of that. So the land use, again, consists of those small service businesses with larger manufacturing uses, typical of that industrial park land use type. The transportation network would ultimately include the previously planned Basalt Creek Parkway extension, improvements at Grams Ferry and Day Roads, as well as the Garden Acres connection. So that all impacted the analysis for this area. No new I-5 overcrossings were assumed, and as the baseline, the public rail crossing at Cahalan was not factored in. So this analysis relies on the northern access working and the southern access working. And then the internal circulation would rely on that north-south local street, providing the main spine for traffic in the area. So just dialing in our entrance points. We have the Tonkin Road and Graham's Ferry Road connection. Preliminary discussions with Washington County did give the general thumbs up on a Tonkin Road connection, but obviously they would have to meet the county's access, safety, and operational standards for development. The Graham's Ferry Road connection is a little bit easier since that's just Wilsonville coordinating and planning for that one. In terms of internal alignment, this is dependent on development, but we are identifying the dashed line to represent that desired connection, although, again, acknowledging that the alignment will and can vary. And then finally, that Cahalan crossing, while not included in the baseline transportation assumptions used for the analysis, it is reflected in the preferred concept as a desirable connection to make. The city has been in contact with railroad representatives who are generally open to the idea of a public crossing. This would likely occur by, upgrading the crossing at Cahalan, and then improvements at another crossing may be required as mitigation to make that work. And so the city is going to continue conversations about feasibility and long-term keeping this as the vision for the area to make that connection. And then in terms of key findings, great news, no major off-site road upgrades are needed beyond what the city is already planning for and what's adopted in the transportation system plan. We had talked a little bit about a potential access point from the west via Morgan Road in the joint work session. That was determined that the preferred concept does not need to rely on that connection, so that's why it's not shown on the preferred graphic, keeping it just to the Tonkin Trail alignment going that way. The internal network performs adequately under the assumed development intensity and traffic conditions. And then the analysis also found that the Ice Age Tonkin Trail alignment can be accommodated as it's shown at a high level, knowing that further pedestrian and bicycle analysis and the exact alignment studies will need to occur. And so just a snapshot of the identified transportation projects in the area. We have that new local industrial access to the site. It will be finalized and provided by development. We have the Tonkin Road upgrades, including trucks access and safety improvements. The Graham's Ferry Road undercrossing improvements to make sure that freight vehicles can safely pass through there. And then the Cahalan Road crossing is still identified as optional, and that could be tied to additional intersection improvements at Graham's Ferry Road and Cahalan, as well as the pedestrian and bicycle trails through the site. And I'll pause there because that's a lot of transportation projects and information.
Awesome. Okay, I'll kick us off with a question. You mentioned no external projects would be needed for this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I don't think I saw in the previous materials was any sort of acknowledgement about the potential wildlife impact of increased industrial traffic along Graham's Ferry Road, especially where the wildlife crosses Graham's Ferry Road from one side of Coffee Lake Creek to another. Is an area where I've anecdotally, it's probably the place I see the most roadkill in Wilsonville, including like beavers and things like that. So I wonder if, is this likely to increase wildlife impact on that crossing, which is just outside of the border of what we're looking at here? And maybe I've missed it, so maybe it's been acknowledged elsewhere.
I will ask staff to help supplement.
That, Commissioner, is a really good question. I mean, common sense kind of feels like the answer is yes, but I can't really speak. I feel like I'm speaking really loud. I can't really speak to that, but we can certainly dig into that and come back with some answers, or at least an answer. But yeah, I had not talked about that yet, so thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Registering a concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Zendel. I can mention that we have not done that analysis yet. We have a robust program around our wildlife crossings, as you know, which is probably why we don't see it in many other locations in the city. We can connect with our natural resources program manager who manages those and see what we can integrate into this as we move forward.
I think that'd be great. I'm really impressed by especially the things along like Kinsman Road and McTwo's and those kind of areas where we see virtually zero wildlife impact, or at least strikings. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Kandrian?
So on the project labeled 3 here, is the assumption that traffic would then go south on Graham's Ferry to avoid the railroad undercrossing?
I think ultimately that project is needed for the area regardless of what happens with West Railroad. So the intention would be to make number 3 happen with or without West Railroad development moving forward.
Yeah, in conversation with the Engineering and Public Works Department earlier today, that was confirmed that they feel strongly that that undercrossing will be needed no matter what happens in West Railroad for future development in Wilsonville.
When you say needed, that they'll need to upgrade it, they'll need to like redo it?
Yeah, it is
Okay.
too short or does not have enough height for trucks to
Yeah, because that's, I mean,
access.
okay, 'cause-
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I probably bike through there like, I don't know, a couple times a month.
Yeah.
And like imagining semis going south on
Oh,
Graham's
yeah.
Ferry
Yeah.
would like not really work very
Right.
well. So,
Yeah, it's needed, it'll be very expensive, but it's also very important. There's a lot of challenges, the wetlands, there's only so much that you can take out of that hillside, so it'll be a challenging project, but it sounds like it's one of the more critical projects that we have for that area.
but is that project dependent upon like how the city decides to move forward with this project specifically, or they're gonna do it regardless?
Not necessarily, I might have Matt jump in here in a second, but that particular project is actually part of the Coffee Creek Urban Renewal Area, so I believe funding at some time can be spent on that without without the development in West Railroad. Matt, I kind of feel like I'm speaking out of turn here.
No, there's some uncertainty here, I just want to say that. But it is correct that the Coffee Creek Urban Renewal Area has funding, I don't want to say set aside, but that is intended to move us closer to building this project. That said, the Coffee Creek plan does not anticipate that funding would be sufficient to actually build out the project. So if there were development proposed in West Railroad before that undercrossing were in place, that's a really important consideration. Miranda, anything you want to add to that?
Sorry, Commissioners, yeah, I would just note that there are a number of improvements planned out here, so I'd have to look back at our engineering plans on the improvements to Graham's Ferry Road as well, in addition to the undercrossing. But the expectation is that this area does get improved over time, not just for West Railroad, but for the city overall. So increased traffic that we have with the full build out of Villebois, and especially if the land to the north of Villebois develops, all of that will require a redundant system and improvements to this area. So it's likely that we'd be talking about the undercrossing at some point with or without West Railroad. And the question really here will be, and it's a little bit of a crystal ball and we won't know until things start to happen, is where do things start to happen first? And that tends to be where the development, like the infrastructure improvements get built first. So we'll be kind of weighing all of those different things as we move forward. But having this established in the master plan as these are the critical points of access, these are the critical points of improvement, that lays then the groundwork for us when we're talking about which projects go into the CIP when do we start working on how we fund those projects, what might be able to get funded through the Coffee Creek plan versus maybe extending that plan if we need to in order to cover other projects. So this lays the groundwork for it to say this is our vision for the area if we can get it there, and these are the projects that would be needed to serve it. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, my follow-up was gonna be like, does the project hinge on one of these things? Because if it hinges on that, and we hope to have identified money, but we haven't, then it's kind of like catch-22 of like, you're just waiting around for one thing to happen so the dominoes can fall. But if it's all part of the larger plan, then I think that's probably sufficient.
And I think one thing to remember here as well, and I don't mean to deflate any energy, but the timeline for the development of West Railroad is likely a decade or two out. So the expectation is that the city is going to have a plan in place on a similar timeline to figure out the undercrossing and funding it.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr.
Did we check into whether the easement area could be used for parking or any of that? Because I know we did that in other parts of the city.
I'm not an expert on that topic, but my understanding is that, I don't know why I'm speaking right now, because I'm not an expert on it. I'm looking to the land use expert here. Typically, underneath power easements, isn't there typically certain uses allowed but no structures?
Correct. So in the past, when we have had discussions with BPA, their response is that, and is this one BPA or is this one?
BPA.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Is that they don't allow any structures, they have limitations on height, and for the most part, what they'll allow is things like paths or possibly parking. But their answer is always going to be, if we need to access something in our easement, we will tear it up and we will do our project. And if you want to have that improvement made again, you will be the one to make that improvement again. So they don't typically take on the responsibility of taking action to correct maybe what has been displaced within the easement. That being said, I think it's like a negotiation point on each different location and whether they'd be open to it or not. So just because they're open to it in one location, they may not be in another. We have not initiated those conversations with them in West Railroad.
And Brenda, just to add on to that a little bit, excuse me, we've heard similar things in other jurisdictions for these easements where as long as there's not structures, often as long as there's not trees or anything else that gets within the way of those lines. When we did the development assumptions for the transportation pieces, we assumed there was no development anywhere near those areas. So, however parking is allocated through those areas or how those easements are used, there's a lot of flexibility for that. But, we believe the areas that are developable, we made assumptions that that was part of the broader transportation and infrastructure analysis that was done after we met late last year.
Thank you. Commissioner Zendel?
Just wanted to plus one that, but in addition to like parking, maybe also green spaces. I think that's the other area, like use that I think we've seen underneath those kind of easements. So yeah, I like that idea. Something to explore a little bit.
Okay, wrapping up with trails and natural resources. So again, the preferred concept reflects the alignment of the Ice Age Tonkin Trail. There's a potential additional trail around that existing wetland, kind of creating a loop, and then could connect to the Cahalan public rail crossing, or just be a pedestrian and bike crossing if ultimately a full public crossing doesn't move forward. Maybe there's still that potential for bikes and pedestrians to cross there. And then we would be remiss to talk about all the other elements that will come with any development in the area, the stormwater infrastructure, the east-west connections that will need to be made, the internal circulation, driveways, off-street parking, landscaping, all of those other elements aren't shown on the preferred concept, but they're not ignored. And then to wrap up our discussion, and we really appreciate the feedback so far, but we have two main questions. One is that, does the preliminary preferred concept reflect the direction that was given and reflect your preferred direction for this area, preferred concept, preferred direction? And then are there any aspects of the concept that need further clarification? Because at this point, we're really looking for everyone to feel comfortable with where the preferred concept is going, and so that when the Basalt Creek Master Plan is presented, that piece feels good to everyone and feels solid.
Commissioner Carr?
Yeah, I do like the combination of what we've come up with when we compared 1, 2, and 3 in October. I think this is a really good reflection of what we were mentioning during that. The area that I saw under I think the zoning, and we'll probably get into that later, there was a comment about kind of flexibility in the market-driven arena versus aspirational. I just want to be careful that our goal here is for this to be industrial land. I know it's right now a bunch of contractors' yards, right? And those are contrary to our plan. I don't want to make it easy for that to continue. There was a comment in here that said, even if near-term uses differ from the city's long-range aspirations, I want to be careful that we don't allow too much building without understanding our long-term aspirations. That was kind of one of my comments. The other one was in the area of explore opportunities for public realm investment. Does that mean like we're naming this the West Railroad area? Or are we going to have a sign, an entry thing that says that's what we're calling it? Or are we going to rename it? Are we, just a little bit more detail, and I understand details may come way down the line, but is that our goal, is to have some type of an entry area that as people drive in, they now know that they're in a special industrial, Wilsonville Industrial, West Side Industrial Area or something. I just want to clarify that. And then my last one, funding source, we didn't mention urban renewal. Did we specifically not mention that? Because isn't this covered by an urban renewal district now, or not?
It's not currently.
Not currently.
On the other side of the tracks, we have the Coffee Creek Urban
Okay.
Renewal Area. We did an infrastructure funding analysis for the greater Basalt Creek area, but did not include West Railroad in that analysis.
But we could expand it to include that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Right now, it hasn't been within the scope of the planning. This is just a really interesting area, and since it is literally separated from the rest of Basalt Creek, it felt like its own thing, as it were. We also expect that because a lot of the land is already aggregated under just a few owners, that if and when development occurs, it would likely happen on a larger scale, and that there would be less need, hopefully, for the city to be facilitating development through infrastructure investments, but that private development alone would be able to be covering those things. So there's some question about whether or not urban renewal would be needed. We do know for those regional projects like the undercrossing that there's a need, but within the area, the hope is certainly that private development, when it occurs, will be able to cover a lot of those projects.
So the Grams Ferry and the undercrossing and potentially the improvement at Kalen Road, those would all be covered under the urban renewal or not? The existing?
So the Cahalan is not contemplated in the Coffee Creek Urban Renewal Plan.
Okay.
But the undercrossing does have, it's named as a project under the plan.
Okay. That's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Canty.
I want to thank you guys for sending over the draft Basalt Creek funding analysis, because that was helpful to see how at least that other part is supposed to pencil out. And so, my background was trying to, when I was working for the government and the intelligence community, was trying to get good information to policymakers so they can make smart decisions, right? And everybody wants you to like predict the future, which like that you just can't do, right? The best thing you can do is say like what people are thinking at that time. But one thing that I didn't see, and I don't know if we have it someplace else, but like, have we had expressions of interest from either specific employers or specific developers who say, hey, if this is set up, you know, per a good plan, we would love to come build A, B, and C here. Is that something that we do normally as part of these project outreaches? Or is it so far down the road that it's not something that we usually contemplate?
Yeah, mostly the latter. Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to think about market realities and development feasibility, but as far as approaching specific developers about prospecting in this area, that's not generally within the scope of what we do. But as part of the greater Basalt Creek effort and the Willard project generally, we have been talking to the development community, have been getting their input. And so they're a part of the process, but not in the sense that we're soliciting them in some way.
Yeah, because I mean, just like personally, it'd be cool to see if you're like, hey, you know, like, I know at some point we've talked about like, there's semiconductor money, right, from plans with the state. And not that you would have like Intel or Lam or any of those companies saying, yes, if you develop this per your plan, we will come and build there. But saying like, talking to some of these companies saying like, hey, well, you know, over the next 10, 20 years, we do plan to expand so that we're aware of potential opportunities to draw those employers here versus kind of like a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And, you know, we're hoping people show up to know like maybe some of the larger economic analysis of larger employers who are saying, hey, you know, because they plan out like 10, 15, 20 years in advance too, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're saying, hey, you know, we think that we're gonna need so many 1,000 square foot of space. And you're like, cool, you know, here's our plan. So you guys can have that in the back of your mind as we move forward and as you move forward, you know, think about Wilsonville. So to me, that would be interesting to kind of supplement some of this material so that we could all have a better understanding of like, if this works according to our plan, like who's gonna be there, as opposed to like, I think when I was on the DRB, one of like the park place things, we were approving a new building for them. We're like, well, who's gonna rent it? And they're like, well, we don't know. We're just gonna build it first. And you're like, okay, so in theory, you can just build this huge industrial space, but like you don't have any tenants lined up, and then that can also exacerbate some of the problems that we have of like, you know, some of the vacant industrial area that is easily seen either from the freeway or as driving through town. Sorry, that was a long soliloquy, I guess.
No, we're getting in the weeds. I appreciate it. Couple of thoughts. I understand the general intent of what you're saying. However, I'll still comment on a more granular basis to say tech-related companies are probably going to struggle with development in this area due to vibration. There's just that sensitivity and that consideration. The other piece that I'll mention is that we haven't, I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I don't know that we've had a large-scale employer self-develop in the Portland metro area since probably the late 1990s. And there's reasons for that, but when you think about an Intel, for example, and I understand you're not suggesting that we're gonna go and get Intel to come to Wilsonville necessarily, but it's still an interesting case study because we know it. It's Oregon, it's close to us, it's in our backyard. In the case of Ronler Acres in Hillsborough, the city aggregated that property through urban renewal and really had a hands-on approach in orchestrating that outcome. And that's really what it requires. Otherwise, what we see a market for right now is speculative development. Private capital going at risk to build speculatively without tenants in place, just like you mentioned, sort of banking that they're gonna build something that's marketable and attractive to companies to move into. Because it's there, it's ready, hand them the keys and they can move in. That's what we're seeing a market for right now, and that's what we would likely see demand for in this area. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, sorry. It just seems like if, you know, say that this is proposed like either a new urban renewal zone or an expansion, but you do have those companies lined up, right, to say, well, here's who's gonna come here. It's a lot easier to say, here's how the city increases property values and here's all that it's gonna bring, versus the speculative piece where it's like, well, you know, they built it, now they have to go find tenants, and if they don't do that, then it's gonna take longer to, you know, pay off some of the debt, like to see those benefits, right? So that's kind of just what I was like wondering if we ever include that in these analyses to say, obviously we can't identify specific companies because they're not gonna know for sure, but, you know, we've talked to these companies or we've talked to people in these industries, they forecast this much growth, this could be a good place for it.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I can just make a comment if it's
Yes.
all right. Just quickly, again, I asked my poor wife to drive the site again to see this morning, and it really drives home the point of accessibility is limited. The existing businesses that are there, the water, we drove down Morgan and kind of dead-ended out there. It's an interesting place, and you all know this, but it really drives home the point when you're looking at a picture on a map and you're actually there. But it sounds like you've merged and blended those comments that you've got for Plan 1.5, I guess. It seems a good balance, and I appreciate you being responsive to those comments. So I'm supportive. It looks good.
Appreciate that.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for the comment.
Thanks. When we're talking about the land uses, I think last time we did the joint work session with the thought around like flexibility of uses. Are we still going to be considering things like, I think we had talked about restaurants and things like that? Is
I was
that
gonna
still
ask about that
part of
too.
the conversation moving forward, or could it be, I guess? I don't know. Yeah.
Commissioners, I'll just jump in because Chris wasn't here in October. So just trying to show him a little grace.
Gotta love a good boss. Thank you.
So as you'll recall, our industrial areas have limitations on retail, but restaurants that would be serving the area, for the most part, should fit. I mean, the limitations there are 5,000 square feet, so a lot of restaurants are 5,000 square feet or smaller. It is something that we can explicitly call out, or we could discuss whether there's a reason to modify that in this area for some reason. But for the most part, you know, a wide variety of commercial uses are allowed, restaurants are allowed, there's just a square footage limitation on retail. And you could, for example, like if you're also thinking about like a brewery, or something, yeah. And a lot of times what happens with that is we would consider the area where the brewing is occurring to be manufacturing. And so the retail would be limited to just the restaurant service area. And so that's the retail component, that's the square footage. So let's say there's a 3,000 square foot retail tasting room and restaurant, but then you have 20,000 square feet of manufacturing. It's probably a lot for, well, I guess if it's a good brewery. But so we would break down the building in that manner when they applied. So we have a lot of that within the city where the retail component is built in within that larger structure, and we're just looking at what the retail component is to calculate that square footage. That's the way the code is written now. You will see the code at your work session in June. We want to get confirmation on this. You've seen it once before, those commissioners who were here last year, and we're happy to find that draft for the new commissioners to take a look at. That showed basically what we're calling the Northwest Industrial Area. So it takes the form-based code overlay in Coffee Creek and includes that for that area, and then takes the land uses that are in our PDI and PDI RSIA and put them in this area. For Basalt Creek, as you know, there were designations of high-tech, light industrial, and craft industrial. And so there were some differences between allowed uses, maybe some limitations on certain uses and certain, what we're calling like districts or sub-districts of that Basalt Creek area. So what we'll be doing, what our job will be doing, Chris will be taking a look at that and looking at what seems most appropriate for West Railroad, given the additional constraints here, and what limitations make sense, what limitations don't make sense. So you'll have an opportunity to talk about that in June if it doesn't look right to you.
Do you know if that creek is a running water creek or if it's a standstill creek, like a wetland area? Does anybody know?
Are you talking?
Like that waterfront area?
Sorry, are you talking about the the Coffee Creek wetlands there, the large space on the west side?
So that one's, but yeah, the running along the property line, I guess, that we're seeing here with the trees, that is not accessible to us?
I think you're talking about the same spot.
Yeah.
Are we? Okay, that is the Coffee Creek wetland, and it
Okay.
does have water.
Like it's, like it's not like standstill water? Okay.
Yeah, it's not like a river.
When I think
but-
about,
It's pretty standstill.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, water flows, like the wetland still eventually like flows and continues to flow to the south. But it's not, like when you're looking at it, it does look like pretty
You're not gonna like
still.
wanna float it on an inner tube or anything.
Right.
It'd be really slow.
Creek is like a trickling creek, you know, like I'm trying to. Okay. So one of the things I think about, like retail spaces and restaurants and things like that, I worry about the mosquito issues, you know, that come up, and so it's something to consider. I don't know how those are mitigated for those areas along the waterways, for businesses. But I do really like the blend of the concepts. I appreciate keeping the green space. That was really important. I was really leaning towards the very first option, but this is a good compromise, while keeping the goals in mind. Yeah, thank you so much for your work on this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Just occurred to me. Thinking, like you talked about mosquitoes, Commissioner, and it reminded me of like there are maybe unexpected consequences of some of the things that we do. If we were to put in this north-south access that connected from Tonkin Road down to Graham's Ferry, are there mitigating things that we can put in place that would prevent through traffic, like cutting around and trying to get from Tonkin Road down to Graham's Ferry by cutting through this industrial area? Or is that a concern that we should be wary of?
Do you mean, Commissioner, do you mean things that would completely disallow through traffic, or just things that would maybe, you've done it once, but you don't want to do it again because it took too long?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a reason there's a benefit for it being a through street
Yeah.
for the people who are occupying that space, right?
Right.
But if, let's say, people are trying to get back from soccer practice or whatever, and they're like, oh, I can save 30 seconds if I cut through here at 90
Right.
miles an hour. Like, are there things that we can do to kind of mitigate that when we're thinking about, I mean, maybe this is too premature to be thinking about this, but down the road, are we, like, when we're thinking about the street design, or when we're
Yeah.
thinking about the actual path that road takes?
Well, I
is
did
that
ask for a robust discussion, so I think that falls within the confines of that. Miranda might have a different take, but one of the things that comes to my mind is first and foremost, we're talking about a road that needs to be able to accommodate industrial traffic, large trucks and whatnot. So how you would mitigate to allow trucks to flow freely, but cars not to, might be a challenge from an engineering perspective. So I think that would be one of the things we'd have to really think through. I don't know that we've had that, since I've been here, we have not had that conversation yet. So I don't think it's a bad thought, but it does remind me that tractor trailers don't like speed humps and things of that nature, but you'd probably need some signalization or control at intersections.
Yeah, and just to jump in, so partly with the traffic analysis, they did look at, what if these connections were made with this additional development. That's fairly coarse, just making sure that the system generally works. If development were to come in through this area, you would have specific traffic impact studies having to be done for each of these intersections and other areas. And I think that would get to, you know, what types of demand would be placed on these specific roads as they're constructed, you know, a little further down the road when we know actually what's going to be going in there. And say, you know, as some folks mentioned, if this happens 10 or 15 years from now, you know, traffic demand could be completely different than what it is today. And so, you know, certainly thinking about that today makes sense, but also knowing that when this development occurs and when those new streets go in, there's going to need to be more specific analysis done at the time of development.
I think we might also be thinking with our 2026 hats on right now, which makes sense, but if we fast forward into the future, Graham's Ferry will be improved and widened, and so I think under that scenario, if you're coming from like Tualatin on Basalt Creek Parkway and can shoot south on Graham's Ferry, it's going to be much more efficient than winding through an industrial park. Like, the problem should take care of itself. I'm speaking theoretically right now, of course, but those are my thoughts.
So along those lines, I was going to also note all of the other projects that are associated with the Basalt Creek Transportation Refinement Plan and the different roads that are in the area. So one of the things we do to mitigate that would be that you have your collectors and your arterials that are looking at moving more of the traffic and cars and trucks, I can't talk tonight, through the area. So to that point, Basalt Creek Parkway will eventually be a 5-lane road. And it will cross all the way across to Boone's Ferry. Day Road will eventually be an improved and widened road. Graham's Ferry, Boone's Ferry. So you have all of these large arterials and collectors. You have Garden Acres that are going to serve that area and provide for the primary avenue of freight through this area. And then what you see on this map is we're actually not contemplating adding this north-south road to like the city CIP. This wouldn't be a city project. It's not an oversized road. So what we'd be looking at here is the developers, when they go to develop, identifying what's the alignment that works best for the development, and then ensuring that whatever that alignment will allow access to the next parcel of development. We don't allow landlocking here. And that eventually that connection could happen with Tonkin. If I'm putting my engineer hat on as well, they would also remind me to say that we like a redundant network because that actually creates a better, smoother, less traffic-filled network. So those are kind of all ways in which we'd be designing it, but I don't think you'd ever probably see the same level of traffic on this type of local road as you would on, say, a Basalt Creek Parkway or Day Road into the future.
Thanks.
Great, thank you for all the questions and comments, I appreciate it. Let's see here, time does permit the commission to take public comment on this work session item. The commission asks that public comment be brief and specific to the aspects of the project under discussion tonight as presented in the packet material and not general in nature or on components of the project not subject to tonight's work session. All right. I don't see anybody in the audience. Do we have anybody online?
I do not have any attendees online.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. I don't think we have any additional questions or comments from staff or commission. Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much for the comments. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We really appreciate the discussion and the ongoing work, the October input as well.
We'll see you in June.
Perfect, perfect. All right, that concludes our work session. The next item on our agenda is an informational item. There's no staff presentation. This is for City Council action minutes. Do we have any discussion or questions about the City Council action minutes? All right. And the 2026 Planning Commission Work Program. Does anybody have any questions about that or any discussion? Okay, what me just make sure, so I didn't miss anything on the last page here. Okay. All right, well, we've completed all the scheduled agenda items. Thank you, everybody. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All right, the meeting is adjourned at 7:10.